Looks can be deceiving. Oftentimes, the most dangerous foes you'll meet don't look the part. With these two wide-grinning goofballs, you'd never expect them to be some of the deadliest fighters in their worlds.
Although these two aren't the strongest around, they make up for it with their sheer speed, evasiveness, and determination.
Sans, Snowdin's resident lazybones skeleton.
And Koro-sensei, former Grim Reaper turned octopus-esque teacher of Class 3E.
For this match, there isn't a ton we have to limit. Sans will be given his feats from Undertale, and anything that supports him in Deltarune. Koro-sensei will be drawn from the Assassination classroom manga and anime, as well as a few weapons and skills from J-Stars.
I think it goes without saying, though, we are not scaling Koro-sensei to Goku or Saint Seiya, and we aren't including any fan-made Undertale AUs either. No, Stronger Than You was not created for Undertale. And even if the Mii Gunner wasn't just wearing a Sans costume, Smash Bros. Scaling would not be included either.
With all that said, let's see which of these two ever-smiling speedsters will outmaneuver the other and come out victorious.
Long ago, two races ruled over Earth, humans and monsters. One day, war broke out between the two races. After a long battle, the humans were victorious. They sealed the monsters underground with a magic spell.
The only way to escape the underground was with the power of 7 human souls. Given that there were no humans in the underground, they were pretty hard to come by. However, the king of the underground, Asgore, never lost hope that one day they'd be able to escape.
In due time, Asgore was able to gather 6 of the human souls needed to dispel the barrier. Through perfectly legitimate means, I'm sure. He seems like a nice guy.
It was not until the 7th human fell down the hole that things would start to change, for better or for worse. As Frisk started making their way through the underground, meeting many kooky characters along the way. Among the first of those were a pair of skeletal siblings, the eccentric royal knight in training, Papyrus, and his more laid-back brother, Sans.
Sans is, on the surface, a slothful, chilled-out, hot dog-selling goofball who follows Frisk through their adventure, keeping an eye out for him. To the end, Sans is always there to help Frisk and even lends moral support when taking on Flowey, or as he would soon be discovered to be, Asriel, the son of Asgore. Sans really is just a fun-loving guy, huh?
Not entirely. If Frisk were to step out of line and begin killing the monsters in the underground, Sans would begin to show more hidden layers of his personality, warning Frisk that, despite making a promise not to, he would step in and put a stop to them if needed. And while this isn't an issue Frisk would have to face in the Pacifist run, that is only one possible outcome of this game.
In the neutral runs of the game, Sans will start seeming more aggressive, but when the player becomes fully genocidal, Sans can no longer afford to be lazy, and starts to show off what he can truly do in a notoriously difficult boss fight to decide the fate of the underground. Or what's left of it, anyway.
Sans doesn't seem like he could do much on the surface, with the game even reporting him to be the weakest monster in the underground. And yet, he's one of the deadliest in spite of that. Despite his lack of direct firepower, Sans is able to attack so quickly that he makes up for it. On top of being able to ignore invincibility frames and add a poison effect to them, he can shred through the player's entire health bar in seconds if they aren't careful.
In taking on Frisk, we have to consider what they have survived previously. An oven blew up in Frisk's face, and they also endured hits from Mettaton, a robot who smashes through steel walls with relative ease. So, Sans can damage someone who can endure all of that. But the term glass cannon comes to mind for a reason. Sans uses teleportation, powers, and other tricks to avoid getting damaged. And it does work out a lot of the time. And being fair, while getting slashed by Frisk's knife did eventually do him in, he did power through it for long enough to walk off screen.
Sans is ultimately the fastest being in the underground, or at least he's the only one with the good sense to dodge attacks. He dodged each and every one of Frisk's attacks, and Frisk was able to dodge spears thrown at them by Undyne, and sound waves shot at them by Greater Dog. And sound waves can travel up to 767 miles per hour. Plus, Sans was able to outspeed a car on the highway with his tricycle.
Undertale does work in a slightly odd way with its combat system. It transitions to a plane where your soul has to dodge attacks from these opponents. Whether or not real-world physics would apply here is unclear. However, if we do apply them, Frisk is capable of avoiding rocks that are traveling with enough speed to catch on fire, and even dodge electricity. With the best speed upgrades, Frisk can be compared to the speed of Vulcan's electric attack, garnering results of over Mach 6. Of course, though, we will be taking these feats with a grain of salt since, again, it's hard to tell whether or not these would truly apply.
However, Sans doesn't just rely on his speed to win battles, he's also a known strategist, and generally knows far more than he lets on. Sans is aware of the existence of alternate universes, and each time the universe he's in gets reset, he retains all of his previous memories, usually taunting the player of how many times he's killed them already. And when we say player, we actually mean the person playing the game, and not just Frisk. Because Sans seems to be somewhat aware of the fact that he's in a game, with him even using RPG mechanics to his advantage, abusing the turn system.
Sans is also good at manipulation, at least when it came to Frisk. He had to do it, because Frisk was far gone at that point. What Sans did was fake sparing Frisk, and giving them mercy, but then essentially sucker punched them after that. Sans also seems to have a scientific mind, given the quantum physics book in his house, and a particular friendship with the more clear scientist, Alphys.
Despite his willingness to kill a child, Sans is a pretty chill guy most of the time. He generally enjoys making bad puns and lazing around Snowdin without much care in the world, although in reality he seems to be pretty apathetic towards his own life, considering that the timeline can just be reset at any given moment. However, he still cares deeply for the lives of his friends, and will try to avenge them. In a fight though, Sans enjoys pissing off his enemy, dunking on them and threatening them at the same time.
What kind of arsenal and abilities is this skeleton packing though? Sans can seemingly attack right at someone's soul, weighing them down by making their soul's essence blue, and then being able to fling them around with telekinesis. You can't even really get up high anymore if your soul is blue. Dang. If you were previously able to fly, you can't anymore, though you can jump a bit. Sans can also teleport all over the place, and can even teleport others into place for his attacks.
This skeleton also has a lot of bones, go figure. Well, he can conjure up a seemingly endless stream of bones, which take the form of projectiles, platforms, and when they're blue, you can avoid them by staying still. The bones don't do a ton of damage, only taking 1 damage each, but he has so many of them hitting you at once that you're likely to get drained of your HP in seconds if you aren't careful.
Sans also has the Gaster Blasters, a bunch of dragon skulls that fire out laser beams. You can send out multiple at a time and surround a foe in a circle, for multiple laser beam shots. There's also the mysterious KR. Sans will hit you with an attack that essentially poisons you, slowly chipping away at your health. The more hits you take from it, the more health you lose and get chipped away over time. This can cause issues for whoever Sans is fighting, though luckily, healing items can cancel out the effects to an extent, potentially even nullifying it depending on how much of their health they heal. Seems about right.
How KR works is pretty vague. In fact, it's not even confirmed what it stands for. There's a good chance it has something to do with karma, though there's nothing to really indicate if the amount of blood on someone's hands changes how quickly the effect will eat away at their health.
Sans has some flaws, unfortunately. We've even had to mention them earlier. Namely that he's lazy and incredibly frail. This directly was shown off when he decided for his final attack against Frisk he would do nothing. Unfortunately, doing such a tactic wouldn't actually work in most fights. And even in this fight, the player managed to overcome it and attack Sans anyways.
This is ultimately what led Sans to getting caught off guard by a second attack from Frisk and getting himself killed. He tried his damn best to convince the player to stop trying, but in the end, it was all for naught, and Kara, who had taken over Frisk's body, wound up destroying everything.
That all said, that is only one possible timeline. In another, Frisk helped usher in a better world for both monsters and humans. Sans and his friends ended up moving topside and living in the human world. This is even shown in Deltarune. Despite that being an alternate timeline, it is an example of how life may have turned out for Sans, living a quiet suburban life without a care in the world. In between his seemingly never-ending battle with Frisk in some timelines, and being trapped by Flowey in others, I'd say he's earned that peaceful life.
Born in a city where you can't let your guard down for a second, you can't trust anyone, the Reaper was nothing short of a killing machine. Not just a deadly assassin, but a highly intelligent one too. While it's true that he learnt to live life without making true connections or showing a lighter side of his, betrayal still followed him, eventually leading to him getting locked up in a facility where escape seemed unattainable.
Eventually, this facility overstepped and created something even more deadly out of this criminal. True love found its way to him, but not even that stopped havoc and carnage from breaking out. So many lives lost, and those lucky enough to survive suffering permanent injury. The one this assassin loved most was even caught in the crossfire, but at the end of their journey, he made a promise. Even if he was a killer, he accepted to become a teacher. This man was nothing short of terrifying at this point, his body succumbing to their experiments.
Hello, how are you? So, I'm the one who blew up the moon?
Huh?
What whiplash? Well, the experiments left him looking a little more marketable. Sure works better as a plushie than this Eldritch horror. Helps that at this point, the Reaper, now going by the name his class gave him, Koro-sensei, was embracing his more fun side. Throughout the series, Koro-sensei showed that not only was he a great assassin, but a fantastic teacher as well. This class went from being the butt of the other kids' jokes to passing exams with flying colors.
Turns out the best motivation for learning properly is money and not dying. See, Koro-sensei not only had a massive bounty on his head, but was also going to destroy the Earth soon, much like he did to the moon. Right?
If you only watched the first episode, sure, but if you actually look into it, you know that that was a rat. See, Koro is not only a squid now, but he's also going to self-destruct, hence why he has such a specific date in mind and isn't just gonna destroy it right at the start of the series. But we don't need to rely on that moon feat to get some good numbers for this guy.
Koro may not look it, but he is incredibly powerful. Even in his earlier forms, he could destroy buildings, but in his current form, Koro has smashed through mountains, shattered walls, and generated massive shockwaves. This shockwave actually equated to 1.7 tons of TNT. Heck, even his kinetic energy alone would at least put him in the small building level range.
But his most impressive feat comes from when he created a tornado that moved the cloud line around him. I know you might think that moving clouds isn't that impressive, but actually clouds are far heavier than you might think. Same goes for creating a tornado at all. Thankfully, we have a track field to use for reference. Going off the size of this tornado, we can conclude that Koro-sensei can output over 140 tons of TNT at his peak. This isn't immediate, mind you. He still needed time to start this tornado up, but still, any feat that turns a cloudy day into a bright sunny one is bound to result in high numbers.
Koro-sensei is also a tough cookie to crack. He's virtually unaffected by gunfire, even casually deflecting them with his tentacles, and he was able to survive an anti-sensei grenade going off on him. To clarify, the anti-sensei grenades are one of many anti-sensei weapons, including bullets and knives, created specifically to kill Koro, as the violent chemical reaction they have with his body can tear him apart, unlike conventional weaponry. Somehow I doubt Sans is going to be bringing any of these into the battle. Possibly his most impressive display of durability is when he took a head-on strike from a form of Grim Reaper, which was strong enough to entirely disintegrate a skyscraper.
But if there's one area Koro-sensei is known for, it's his speed. Koro-sensei from the beginning of this series was said to be capable of Mach 20 speeds, already impressive enough. But Nagi-san notes that he appears to be getting faster early on, and it's not hard to deny given the other feats he pulls off. Bullets move in slow motion for him, he hopped from the Earth's atmosphere several times over, he reacted to explosions, he traveled from Brazil to Tokyo at speeds of Mach 36, and kept up with the aforementioned Reaper, who can travel at Mach 40 speeds.
Koro's best speed feats, however, come from his ability to create several Koro clones, sometimes several for every student in his class. Just one of these instances got results of nearly Mach 70,000, around 7.9% the speed of light.
The brain power it would take for him to teach over 20 students simultaneously is insane. Because keep in mind, he's not creating actual clones. This is all him leaving multiple after images and holding all of these separate conversations in real time. Though I guess this shouldn't come as too much of a surprise. I mean, the guy was able to reprogram an AI to become sentient. He essentially created life here. Or how about the time he answered several questions in textbooks which contained grenades that would explode if they were open for too long? So he opened and closed them all quickly enough so that the handles of the grenades inside them didn't have time to go up.
Even that is barely scratching the surface. Answering a few textbook questions, even under that much pressure, is nothing next to him memorizing every question in Japanese academic history. And then being able to pass on his knowledge to his class so effectively that all of them got top marks in exams that the principal specifically designed to be above their level so they would all fail.
Well, of course he taught them all so well, because at the end of the day, he does care about his class. What started as just a promise he made to Aguirre to help the future youth, quickly became something he became truly passionate for. Meeting her changed him from a cold, unfeeling assassin to a silly, yet ultimately really kind-hearted man. He would still get stern when he needed to, threatening the kids at first to get them motivated, but his primary goal was still to see them succeed in the end, even if he had to put his own life on the line to do it.
Whether keeping Kayano in place for the students to talk her down by getting himself impaled, which he only had a 50-50 shot of surviving, or fending off the new Reaper in his final hours, there's nothing Koro wouldn't do if it meant protecting his students.
Koro-sensei's newfound physiology gave him a boatload of strange abilities. He can fly at great speeds, of course, camouflage himself and change the color of his face depending on his emotion. He has enhanced senses and even a sixth sense that let him dodge a light-speed laser one time. But his most iconic ability would be his regeneration. He can grow entire limbs back, and even endure a large portion of his body being reduced to slime. This does take a good amount of stamina to use, however. Plus, his heart is a weak point that can't really regenerate well. But it does also mean his body is super malleable, allowing him to stretch to great lengths and change the shape of his limbs, like turning them into drills.
Koro can also generate large beams of energy. He was able to destroy a tent that could withstand tank fire, and when his emotions are strong enough, he could shoot one that destroyed the Reaper. That last one was a culmination of all his emotions, and took some time to build up though. Finally, if he's really in a pinch, for 24 hours he can retreat into his absolute defense form, which can reportedly withstand nuclear explosions, though he can't switch back to his regular form until those 24 hours are up, and in this state he is completely immobile.
Koro doesn't really have much in the way of weapons though. He does have disguises, which have a hit and miss track record admittedly, but more importantly he has missiles, which he seems to be able to just pull out of nowhere. With that bit of disappointment, we can lead our way down to his weaknesses.
As most of the series involves them trying to find his weaknesses, Koro-sensei has a lot they find out about him. He can panic easily, he gets motion sickness somehow, he becomes slower after shedding or regenerating, and his heart is his main weak spot.
There are plenty of other weaknesses, but how many of these are actually going to be useful in the end? The kids get pretty fucking specific about what he's weak to, like how he can only draw cartoons.
A lot of the ones Koro-sensei has aren't really applicable to this fight. Sans is not a girl with big boobs serving him a plate of hot food while they're in a swimming pool, while also judging him in a singing competition.
Yeah, I guess Sans isn't that.
Knowing these weaknesses isn't a surefire win against him though, because despite an entire year of efforts, his students were ultimately never able to get the jump on him enough to where they could kill him, even after devising a plan that exploited many of his shortcomings and put him in a seemingly inescapable bind.
Koro did, however, eventually meet his end after defeating his successor one last time. After being worn down, he could no longer move, and with the previously mentioned laser about to strike again which would kill him, Koro's students had to make the difficult choice to kill their loving teacher.
It wasn't easy for them to do, but Koro peacefully accepted his death, and the rest of Class 3E were able to go through with one last strike to the octopus's heart.
Even years after his departure, Koro's impact on all of their lives could not be overstated. He turned what would have been a group of hopeless flunkies into a mature group of adults who all went on to have bright futures. They even re-met several years down the line at their old classroom and fixed the place up in memory of their teacher. Though Koro-sensei had long since departed from this world, he would always live on in their hearts.
The difference between the novice and the master is that the master has failed more times than the novice has tried.
Well, between these two mentoring monsters, who is going to assassinate the other and make them have a bad time? Alright, yeah.
Nice shot, but did you really think I was just gonna stand there and take it? You're showing great effort so far. Now let's see how you handle this. Wow, didn't think skeletons could bleed. I didn't hit you too hard, did I? A+ for tricking me. Can't say I expected that. Not this time. Now here's your final exam. I used my molt to protect you from the blast. Wasn't about to let you die on me now if I could help it. Maybe I didn't, but... well, I made a promise. And yet my efforts were in vain. I'm sorry. See you around.
Well, Sans put up a good fight, but Koro-sensei ultimately had him beat.
From a physical standpoint, Koro-sensei had Sans beat in the stat trinity. With strength and durability, that can be expected, given that a lot of the best feats for most Undertale characters are below what Koro-sensei has shown. And even then, Sans downscales from them by virtue of being the weakest monster in the underground. But it became more damning with the speed advantage Koro held. Sans is fast, but Koro's Mach 20 speeds were already enough to outpace the skeleton. But as things go on, Koro's speed advantage gets greater. Needless to say, Sans didn't have any sub-relativistic feats to speak of. Even including the electricity dodging, it just wasn't enough to dodge consistently like he does in this boss fight.
Well, we already pretty much know that Sans' fighting tactics are deliberately done to make up for his lack of strength and durability. Could they work against Koro? Well, no. His main advantages against Frisk would be his speed, teleportation, and overwhelming his foe in short bursts. But that's the thing, not only do these attacks only really work in short bursts, Sans also easily tires himself out, and can be caught off guard by someone who is more experienced, has greater speed and reflexes, and equal or greater amounts of range and variety in attacks, which Koro has for sure.
Now, there are things we could give to Sans to give him the benefit of the doubt. We already mentioned the electricity thing, but if we were to be absurdly generous and say that they were natural lightning bolts, and saying that these falling rocks were moving as fast as actual meteors, even though the characters being underground means they couldn't actually be proper meteors falling from the atmosphere, that would give Sans nearly Mach 300 reaction speeds, which Koro still outpaces with his sub-relativistic calc. Hell, even if we assume that this sun-shaped object here was emitting actual light attacks instead of being weird particles of who knows what, the relativistic speeds of reacting to those would still not be something Koro couldn't match with his sixth sense, which let him dodge light-speed lasers. Not to mention, this kind of speed isn't something Sans can keep going for more than a few minutes, while Koro can easily go at top speeds with a smile for hours at a time before he starts to get tired.
Sans and Koro had some similar traits, but Koro was not only generally more intelligent, Sans only really went all out after just about everyone he knew had died. Without that kind of motivation, Sans is a pretty inactive person, whereas Koro consistently engages in combat throughout the series. I mean, he was an assassin for years after all. To an extent, that lazy attitude helps him out in the fight with that special attack of his, but Koro doesn't abide by RPG rules. If Sans starts to fall asleep, it should go without saying that he isn't going to win at that point.
Overall, Koro-sensei just had every advantage he needed to overcome Sans here. No rage quitting either. He'll do it on his first try.
Making this multiverse match's winner, Koro-sensei.
It might be a fight like you see on the screen, a swain getting slain for the love of a queen. Some great Shakespearean scene where a ghost and a prince meet and everyone ends in mincemeats. The world is a stage is a world of entertainment.